What's up, everybody?
Oh,
Welcome.
man. Hello.
Glad you guys are here on another episode of We Got Balls. And don't be so sad or droopy today when you look at the title. That we're not just going to talk about losing your erection all day long. We're going to talk about some other things that are really important. And if you want to talk about stuff, you can put your questions in the chat. We would love to engage with you. What's up, Brad? Hey, bros. Big hugs going out to you. Hey, from Chris in Omaha. Hello, everyone. Hello, Carrie. Say hey to Chris and Scott and the rest of the gang, says Manny H. R. Smith here. Hello, all. Glad you guys are here on a Friday, a free for all, free baller Friday, as Carrie reminds us. So, what's up, Just a Dude? How are you doing today? So it's glad to be with you guys. How you doing, Scott?
I'm doing well. I'm getting ready to go up to Dallas, spend the weekend with my brother.
Oh,
And
fun.
I've got pretty much all the equipment, all the supplies for the Colorado adventure trip coming up here in 2 weeks. So I'm excited about that.
That's
But
going to be a lot of fun. A
it
lot of
is.
fun.
I cannot wait.
In fact, we're having a planning meeting for that tomorrow. We're going to have 12 guys going on that trip and going to be hiking up in the high Rockies. And it's going to be a great time to connect with a bunch of guys and their stories and have some amazing experiences. In fact, I was looking at pictures about the trailhead where we're going to get started. And it's a beautiful alpine pine forest with some great opportunities for some fire pits to be able to sit around and burn some firewood. The only problem is I don't have my big axe to bring with me, so we'll have to just break it up manually.
Wow.
But we need the exercise, right? It's not like we're not going to be getting any exercise up there, right, Scott?
I don't know. Do you think I'm like Captain America in Avengers where I can just rip wood apart?
Yes, of course.
Speaking of ripping wood.
I think you're like that. So Andrew Life Blurbs joining for the first time. Glad you're here. Daniel Tillman from Tallahassee. Just a Dude says, drop your linen and start your grinning. So there'll definitely be some bathing up in the mountain streams and lakes up there where we are.
Brad Jensen says, losing my erection, the REM hit that never was, although I was going to sing that. That's me in the corner. Yeah, well, that's the theme of today's live show is things that make your erection go, meow.
Well, specifically how porn makes your erection go, and all the negative effects of pornography. So that's definitely what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about that in specific and in general, but we're always talking about what you guys want to talk about. So feel free to put your questions and comments in the chat. And if you're on the live already, there's 27 guys on the live. Hit that like button for us and make sure that YouTube promotes this content out into the interwebs. So, Scott, we actually have one question that we're going to get to first because it came in at the very end of our Wednesday episode. Like, there was a guy that put the question literally seconds before we got off the air. It says, what happens when a partner no longer wants to have sex and makes all kinds of excuses to not have sex? Because we talked about sex and what is sex for on Wednesday. So when you think about the question of what happens when a partner doesn't want to have sex with you anymore, how do you get out of that slump? How do you get out of that, sex deathbed or dead sex bed, whatever the phrase is? How do you get out of that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is a really hard question. And it holds a lot of grief, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And realistically, if you have a spouse that doesn't want to have sex with you, there's nothing you can really do about it because you're not responsible for another person's emotions or their desires, are you?
No.
And the more you invest in trying to change a person who cannot embrace desire in your relationship, the more frustrated and helpless you're going to feel. And so I would suggest, the place to start is to have an honest conversation with your spouse about the lack of sexual intimacy and desire in your relationship, and would they be open to exploring that and figuring out what's going on? Would they go see a marriage or family therapist or a sex therapist with you and just have a kind and curious conversation about when did this start in your lives, and how is it helping you by avoiding sexuality, and what is this related to? And because hyposexuality, we talked a lot about hypersexuality on Wednesday, and this category of
Which is
using porn
too,
could
too
fall in.
much sex. Hyper means too much. It means an overuse of sex and being compulsive with your sexuality. Hypo is too little, right?
That's right.
Okay.
And I think the statistics are about 30% of evangelical women suffer with hyposexual desire. This is from Sheila Gregoire's The Great Sex Rescue book and the research that she did for that, I believe, if I'm quoting it correctly. But
Sounds right.
so there are two common problems in sex in marriages. One is uh, seeking too much sex, which is typically more the male um, challenge than it is the female, and the female one is typically hyposexuality, although it's not always that way, but in general it is.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
But the lack of sexual desire can come from a lot of places. So it can come from physical problems. Women, when they go into menopause, can actually suffer from a lack of testosterone. Testosterone is what creates libido in both males and females. A lot of people don't understand this, that females do produce testosterone in their bodies, not through their testicles like men do, but through their adrenal glands.
Mm,
And so a lack of libido in a female can be driven by a lack of testosterone. So that's a
okay.
simple fix medically that can
Go to
be.
your doctor, get diagnosed, get a test, see if you can take a supplement.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you should be evaluated from a physical standpoint first if your libido is low. And then if there's no indications that there's something going on with your endocrine system, your hormones, then maybe start to look at a psychological cause. Like, when did this start? A
Great
lot of
question.
times
Great
women will
question.
suffer from low libido because of unaddressed sexual harm in childhood. So unaddressed sexual abuse tends to show up in either over sexual behavior or under sexual behavior. And so examining that, and then there may be structural problems in the marriage where there's a lot of contempt, and even just good old fashioned stress. Like if you and your partner are under a lot of financial stress and you're raising children and you've got high demanding jobs, it's normal to suffer from a lack of libido in that
Mm,
situation as well. So maybe there can be some adjustments made in lifestyle. Maybe there's something in the story that needs to be engaged. Maybe there's something in your joint story that needs to be engaged. But the question would be, would you be willing to explore this with me versus, no, I don't want to talk about it. Like there's a
yeah.
real problem there.
Yep. And that's where that dead sex bed kind of conversation gets really sticky, is because when nobody wants to talk about it, it just stays dead. And there's really
Yeah.
not much you can do. You're both
Now,
sad.
I got to be honest about this. I see this a lot with some guys in their marriages because they're acting out outside of their marriage.
Yep.
And they think they're hiding it from their wife, but their wife suspects something is going on and
Of course.
has for some time, because the wives always find out or they always know. And what ends up happening is that is there in the relationship between you and your spouse, and you can't hide it.
Yep.
So no matter how good you think you are at hiding, guys, and guys, we all think we're brilliant at hiding things, and nobody will know. It's going to show up in your sex life.
Yep.
And I'll tell you why. Because your wife knows in her body.
Well, and because in the past you have been coming to her for your sexual needs and now you're not. And so there's this place where she knows, well, how is he getting that need met? It could be with porn. And if that's a deal breaker for your spouse, she's going to be accusatory of that. But if it's more than just porn, if it's actually acting out with somebody else or having hookups with somebody else, that's going to be a big issue in your relationship because it's a betrayal of trust.
Yeah.
And so that's where you're really going to move beyond just the problem of not having sex in your marriage into a problem of, can I really trust you? Are you safe?
And it's creating anxiety in you because every time you go to be sexual with your wife, you're looming with images of your last sexual escapade with somebody outside the marriage.
Hmm.
And again, no matter how hard you think you can suppress that or repress that, you can't repress it. You know about it. It's obviously aware in your conscious mind. So you may compartmentalize that, but you're not going to get away from the effects that it has on your nervous system. So it creates a lot of unconscious anxiety. And when you're anxious, you can't get sexually aroused and you're not going to want to pursue sex anyway. So sometimes it's secrets. Sometimes it's hiding. And yeah, guys, if that's in your life, you need to take responsibility for it. Don't just act like it's a problem of your wife not having a sexual desire. Maybe you've contributed to the problem as well. So that's how I would answer
There's
it.
a
So it's
lot there.
complex question, isn't it?
It gets into a lot of tentacles for sure. So let's talk about being pied, Scott. What does it mean to be pied when we are struggling with erectile dysfunction and there's a cause for that? You know, that's what we talked about in the lead off of this episode. So porn has a lot of negative effects. And sometimes when we use too much porn, we get pied. So what are we talking about?
So to get pied means you have porn-induced erectile dysfunction. This was a term that did not exist in the lexicon of common conversations 30 years ago. And the reason why is because 30 years ago, internet porn was not a thing. And then, around 2000, we start to get higher speed internet. You don't have to wait forever for dial-up connections to download porn.
And the novelty novelty, all the different things to click.
And video. So
yeah,
initially, remember dial-up when it was all, going in through AOL to get to the internet, you could get photos and they would take
forever to download. Yes.
Yeah. So that was an invitation to learn how to edge, right?
Yes.
As you waited for the photo but then when high speed connections became widely available, now you've got video. So video is really addictive and really highly stimulating. So we've talked about this phenomenon known as a supernormal stimulus. And a supernormal stimulus is anything that creates a highly intense degree of arousal and pleasure around something that's normally got a level kind of moderate or common, right? Common pleasure. Supernormal stimulus is way above common pleasure.
Way above. It's supernormal just means it exceeds the normal. Would you say the chemical release? Typically, chemical releases like, hey, I have a snack. It feels good. It feels nice. That's a normal stimulus. An orgasm, especially when it comes stimulated with some erotic imagery or video, can become how many times that? I mean, how much more dopamine do we get from watching porn and masturbating than a candy bar?
You get, so food generates 150% increase. So it's a 50% lift over a baseline of dopamine, what would normally occur. So when you eat, there are neurochemicals that are released from the consumption of food. Dopamine is being one of those. Dopamine is a primary motivation chemical. So it motivates you to seek. So when you eat food, you get a 50% lift. When you do video games, a 75% lift over your baseline. Food is twice sex is twice your baseline.
Okay.
But you can do things to increase the sexual dopamine baseline by adding additional novelty, by adding intensity, by adding risk. There's all kinds of ways to do that. And that's where we get the idea of supernormal stimulus. So, for example, in food, junk food is a supernormal stimulus because it's high in sugar, high in fat, and high in salt and sodium. And so we love those chemicals. They taste delicious and they're more insatiable. So have you ever noticed you eat a couple of potato chips and you can't stop?
It just becomes addictive. Yeah, I have to have the whole bag. Yes, until I feel disgusting and I want to throw it up. Yeah.
Potato chips are much more scrumptious than a baked potato, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's the same. It's the same core substance.
And then, but you can take a baked potato and slather it with butter and sour cream and cheese and
Mm.
chives. Now you got a supernormal stimulus going on. So
Yes.
you can do the same thing with sexuality with those additional factors. Now, the classic experiment that was done on this by neuroscientists was in the 70s. They took a butterfly species and they took a female of the butterfly species and they made a plastic facsimile of the female and painted it with very vibrant colors. So it was much
Mm.
more attractive and eye catching than the female of the species. And then they put the butterflies in a cage, males and females, and the plastic facsimile. And the males were only drawn to mate with the facsimile because it was much more stimulating. So, this is where this idea comes from. Is porn a supernatural or supernormal stimulus? Well,
Please and thank you. Yes.
yeah. So in pornography, you have guys with six-pack abs and enormous penises having sex with women with triple D breasts who begin to scream in orgasmic pleasure the minute the penis is pulled out of the guy's pants, and it
Hmm.
just goes deeper and harder and more exciting from there.
Or whatever your arousal template is. Scott just described a heteronormative arousal template. This could be a number of things that are super normal stimulating to you.
So what are super? So how do you add to this? Well, you can add violence to the mix, which adds that element of risk. You can have multiple people, which adds more thrills because it's more people to have sex with. You can engage in BDSM, which
Different
heightens the riskiness.
locations, different
You
story components, all that stuff. Yeah.
do it in public, and pornographers know how children are sexually abused, and they mimic those storylines, in the content and the storylines in the professional porn that's produced. But now what's become a supernormal stimulus is amateur porn because I can go see my next door neighbor or
Mm,
the high school cheerleader who's got a OnlyFans or the TV star that used to be on Wizards of Waverly Place who's now masturbating on camera for everybody. So
yep.
that's a supernormal stimulus because it's not something you would normally see, and it's adding that excitement level. Now, when you masturbate to a supernormal stimulus a lot, normal stimulus doesn't seem all that great.
Yep.
It doesn't release a lot of dopamine, not nearly as much as the supernormal stimulus. And then what's happening in your brain is that dopamine level spikes really high and then it drops really low. So you have a waveform, and the wave is high at the top and it's low at the trough. And you begin to start to feel very empty and lonely after the orgasm. And so you go back and repeat the behavior. And as you're doing that, you're actually creating big waves in your dopamine. Think of your brain as a swimming pool with a wave maker in it. When the waves are like this, the water stays in the pool. The dopamine stays in the pool. And so you don't deplete your dopamine reserves. When the waves are big like this, they start splashing out of the pool, and suddenly you start depleting the dopamine that's in your brain. And after you orgasm, you're not nearly as excited anymore. So
No.
you get up in the ante. And that's how an addiction develops, but it's also how porn induced erectile dysfunction develops because you have to keep the thing going much more extreme, longer periods of time, more frequently to get the same level of dopamine, which is why sex becomes addictive. Did I
And
help?
that is how that's the technical explanation for why porn induced erectile dysfunction creates that dynamic, which also comes from a level of desensitization in your body itself. Because when you are masturbating, you have what they call it, penis death grip syndrome, where you have your body becomes accustomed to your hand, and it's not nearly as the same tension as a vagina. Vagina, or even an anus, for that matter of fact, is not the same kind of tension that you can put on it with your digits. And so there's so much in that I think is so real. As a great question from Manny H in the chat says, seeking feedback, seeking porn for me comes from deeper issues, a lack of self-worth, having a bad day. What do you think?
I do think, well, now we're talking about why are you using porn?
Yep. Yep.
So now we're getting into the story. So I think the question there, Manny, is when did you first begin to experience sexual arousal as a boy? What was the context of that? How did you discover pornography? What did it do for you? What kind of porn was it? When you're looking at porn now, what are you looking for? There's all
Yes.
kinds of issues here that go back to our stories. It's not just a simple matter of, well, I feel bad about myself, and so I go use porn to feel temporarily good about myself. Yes, that's true, but when did that start? What's the story there?
And
And
when someone doesn't know the story, they say, "Well, I just found it one day and it made me feel good and I kept using it." What's the real deep dive behind when that question, what is the story? Because I think a lot of guys just say, well, there isn't a story. I'm a guy. I like porn. It makes me feel good. When I don't feel good, I want to feel better. And so I just go to porn to make me feel better. There's got to be something more to that question. What is the story that we can direct guys to, right?
well, yeah, there's not a lot of curiosity in that approach. You're not going to get very far in making sense out of that. But the reason that you're using porn is specific. There is a reason. It's not
Yeah.
random. And there's a reason why you're drawn to the kind of porn you watch. And so our invitation would be curious about when in your life that became a thing and what was the context of your life before that? Because what we often are finding with guys that really have a serious addiction to pornography or sexually acting out outside of that is there's a lack of care and a lack of belonging and a lack of life in their relationship with their mom and their dad.
Mm,
And they've lived that way typically 8 to 10 years. So an average boy is exposed to porn around 8 to 10 years of age. But there were years prior to that of not really having a family where they felt seen or known or pursued, or they felt a lot of belonging. And so when porn shows up, it's meeting a lot of those needs in a fantasy way. Because I can go on to porn and I can imagine somebody loving me and somebody pursuing me and somebody giving me physical touch and,
hmm
somebody bringing me into excitement and helping me be initiated as a man, experiencing sexuality and tutoring me and all that. There's all these fantasies, right? And that fantasy is doing something for me
hmm
that's typically a reversal of what I've been experiencing in my family. So that's where you kind of got to be curious about, well, what is the porn doing for me? Besides just the sexual pleasure and the orgasm, what are you getting out of it? Like, how's it helping you? And
Yes.
then when did that become a thing in my life to go to sexual activity to get that? And thank you, RMC, for the super chat. We see
Thank
you.
you, RMC. Boop, 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 boop. Yes. Thanks for your love, my friend. Glad that you're here.
Um,
Um,
I was going to say, Jim Whitman asked the question, can uh, PIED be fixed over time? Yes, it can.
yep.
How do you fix it, Chris?
Well, the first thing you got to do is you got to reduce your dependency on pornography as a emotional regulation device. Because as long as you are looking at those supernormal stimuli, and even maybe even using masturbation or jacking off to cope with your problems, you're going to get locked in that behavioral dynamic. So that's the first thing you have to do is find other ways to cope with your emotional needs, healthier ways that don't involve taking you to that place of supernormal stimulus. It's just like, I hate to say it, Scott, it's like going on a diet. You kind of have to go on an emotional diet and find places where you can be connected and feel safe and find relationships with other guys, preferably who are safe, who you can talk to about what you're feeling. And I think that, man, that's such a foreign concept for guys these days to want to talk about their emotional world with another guy. Like that's
Well,
like, why would I want to do that?
and even the way we talk about it is, I have a porn problem. No, you don't.
Yep. No,
Porn is your solution.
that's it.
I have a sex problem. No, you don't have a sex problem. Sex is your solution. What's
Yes.
the real problem? And you nailed it. Like, my real problem is I don't know how to sit with my big, unpleasant feeling emotions like anger or
Hmm.
fear or sadness or shame. And so I didn't learn to go to other people as a boy when I was experiencing those big feelings because my parents were not engaged. They
That
weren't
was
there.
my story. They didn't make a safe space for me to bring my feelings, so I coped with them. I stuffed them down until I could find a better way to cope.
And the way I found it was to blow it out my penis because when you get to
Yep.
be 8, 9, or 10 and start rubbing it and it gets hard, it
It
feels really
feels
good.
so
And
good.
it immediately solves my feeling bad problem in my body, doesn't
Yep.
it?
Yep. Yep.
And if I've got stories that are going on in my head, the porn solves the stories that I'm living by giving me a fantasy world where I don't have those same problems. Right. And
Yep.
so both of them go hand in glove, so to speak, as a way to deal with the unpleasantness of my relational and emotional dynamics in my family system. So the first way to get over PED is to start to become emotionally literate. You have to start
Mhm.
to develop a language that enables you to actually name and then feel emotions in your body
Yep.
and to learn to engage other people in those emotional ups and downs that you're going through and receive kindness and care and connection instead of going and masturbating your feelings away, which is what we do as boys.
And that's all we know to do. We're doing the best that we can as boys. But when we get to men, then we have situations like Daniel Tillman is describing. I'm watching porn instead of having relationships that are too high maintenance. Relationships when you were a boy were too high maintenance. It's too much for you to handle. And when you get to be a young man or an even older man, you may say, listen, I don't want to deal with this shit. I don't want to have to engage the reality of my life. It's too hard. We go back and watch the episode Life is Hard, because uh, that is a reality for all people, especially us men. And we don't mean hard dicks, do we, Scott?
We do not. Luke says, Scott, spitting facts as always. I will try to stop spitting facts, Luke. I am
so
sorry for spitting facts all over you.
so how would you approach somebody that says, listen, I just watch porn instead of dealing with my high maintenance relationships? I mean, that's a common expression that we have, and yet it's so difficult to look a guy in the face and say, you're right, it is a easier solution, but it's not a better solution.
Well, yeah. So, like, what is it doing for you? Again, how does that actually help you mature and grow? And is that helping you become the best version of yourself? Like, is that the
Right.
guy you really want to be at the end of the day?
Yeah.
Like, instead of engaging in the difficulties, like, let's be honest about it. Sometimes intimate relationships are really difficult, Chris, aren't they?
Yes.
For you?
Yes.
They're for
But they're
me.
difficult for a purpose, aren't they? Aren't they hard for a reason?
I mean, they typically change me and they change my partner when we're willing to sit through the hard
Mm.
shit.
Help me grow. Yes.
They're kind of a crucible for change, and that's David Snarsh in his books on marriage. You know, he wrote Passionate Marriage years ago, and um, he's written a lot about differentiation and um, individuation and also attachment. But to be in a healthy relationship, you have to be your authentic self, but you also have to be willing to be attached to another person and go through the sludge of, going through the difficulties of fighting things out at times. And
Yep.
it's pleasant.
Because
Porn
that's how
doesn't,
change happens. You can't really change and grow without those difficult things. I mean, that you can't really, can you?
no, you can't. Like, all neuroplasticity, brain change,
Yep.
growth, learning requires discomfort.
Yes.
It's how the brain grows. So we have to put ourselves in situations to mature and become better people if we're going to do that. So, but for porn, And masturbation as a whole, that combination of the two, what it does is it makes really no demands on me for growth. And I
Mm,
just stay stuck in the same immature place. Like I've been doing that since I was 12 years old. Do I really want to keep doing that as a 62-year-old man? Like at some point, maybe I should be maturing a little bit. Right.
yes. Yes.
And, it used to be, have you ever seen the movie Hook with Robin Williams? Right.
Oh yeah, right, several times.
It's a great movie. But the point is, the idea of Peter Pan syndrome, boys who don't ever want to grow up, it's a
Hmm.
real phenomenon with men. Like these behaviors that we developed as boys, we become dependent on them and we think they're helping us, but they're not. They're really just keeping us stuck in a very young, immature place. That's not to shame anybody, but it's to invite you to a greater degree of perhaps maturity and self-reflection and asking the question, is this really what I want to do 5 years from today? Do I still want to be in this place where I'm jacking off to porn every time I feel angry, afraid, sad, or shame?
Yes.
So, um,
Time Buddy says, similar to Daniel, after being alone for years now, porn filled a void. I see it now has its consequences.
yeah.
And I mean, that's the reality is there's nothing that comes cheap or easy in this life. And that's a hard listen, man to man. It's man up. It's a hard lesson to learn, to realize I have to continue to do the work of building relationships and becoming emotionally aware. When I am sad, I can't just take a pill or watch a video to make my sadness go away. When I am angry, I can't just go to a course and manage my anger. I've got to understand what's really beneath that anger. When I'm afraid, sure, I can take some medication and try to minimize that, but the reality is my life circumstances are cultivating that fear, that anxiety, and I've got to have a way to cope for that relationally, because we're all meant to be relational beings. No one is an island.
And we want to push the easy button on pretty much everything in our lives. Our
Yep.
brains by nature are very lazy. They like to conserve energy. They don't like to learn new things, but we have to push ourselves out of that comfort zone to learn new things. And challenges and difficulties in relationships, in your sexuality, in just kind of facing resistance are the price tag for a meaningful life. There is no path to a meaningful life that you push an easy button to get to, Chris.
Correct. Correct.
Like I have people compliment me. I'm going to be 63 in 2 months. They compliment me on my body, my physique. Man, you look like you're in great shape. What do you do? I'm in the gym every effing day. That's what I do. Some days I like it better than others. Some days it's drudgery. I'm preparing for this hike so that I'm not huffing and puffing as we go up a 14,000-foot hike.
Yep.
Was it fun doing that? No, it
Nope.
wasn't fun. But the fun comes at the end of the challenge when my hard work pays off in an accomplishment with a bunch of men that I care and love and want to be with and do something fun together. And we high five ourselves at the top of the peak.
Mm-hmm.
So when did we start to feel like everything in life has to be easy and sex should be easy too? Really? Like you want to just become a good lover without practicing? That's not going to happen.
Isn't that where we're heading with all this AI and sex dolls, shit? Is that we think satisfying sex is going to be about just one button away, one comment away, one experience away. It's not gonna be easy.
Really? How's that working out for you young men that have withdrawn from the dating market? You're home every night playing video games and masturbating. You
Yep.
live in an alternate reality of fake conquest and fake sex.
Yep.
How you
Yep.
feel about that at 35 in your mom and dad's basement? And I'm not making fun of it. It's a reality.
Yep. Unfulfilling.
So we are coming to the end of 2, maybe 3 fatherless generations of men who don't know how to engage the real world with adventure and some fortitude and some guts.
Yep.
And at some point, you've got to decide, how long do I want to be down figuratively or even literally in my mom and dad's basement? And, or do I want to get out and actually participate in life? And sometimes life is not fun. There are bills to be paid. There are setbacks. There are heartache. And when you don't feel like you can handle those things emotionally, it's easy to retreat to being a little boy again and soothing yourself by masturbating to porn.
Yep.
But it's not going to help you.
It's not. Carrie has a great question. What is the expectation of an easy, low maintenance relationship? Doesn't it take work to develop connections to create easier relations because the line of communication has been worked or developed? So there is no such thing as a low maintenance relationship. They're just maintained relationships. Scott and I are friends. We are not friends because we're good dudes and we like each other and we can just show up and do this work and everything is hunky dory. We maintain our relationship every single week. We text every week multiple times. We talk face to face about stuff that's got nothing to do with We Got Balls because we know, and man to man, that's what it takes to build a relationship. What we've learned, though, is how to be consistent in building our relationships. That's the key. How can you be consistent and be emotionally self-aware to be able to share, I am not doing well right now. Please help me. Scott, can you help me? This is going on. Talk to me about this. I need to get this off my chest. That is my self-awareness that's happened over years of doing what we call recovery. When we're talking about recovery, that's not stopping looking at porn and masturbating. What that means is living the life I was meant to live. And that comes from learning how to build a well-maintained set of relationships with myself, others, and in our view, with the one who created us.
Yep. And JP says, most of the time I have no idea what my feelings are. I think a lot of the guys, we have 42 guys on here. I think half the guys would say that.
Yep.
Why is it? Well, there's a couple of reasons for that. Is number one, men's emotional brains develop much more slowly than a female's as boys, as little boys, infants. It takes the first 2 years of life to kind of set and train your emotional brain up. And women, females, have a much easier time than that than males do. And there's some specific things to the male brain that make it more susceptible to both maternal care disruptions as well as environmental toxins, for example. But by and large, baby boys are at risk for emotional dysregulation where your brain and your emotional system doesn't work nearly as well as a female's does, for those matters that are very specific to the male gender. Number one, in early life. But the second reason is there is a lot of cultural prohibition against men actually feeling their emotions.
Yep.
We are told that a real man is stoic. He's detached from his feelings. Even when his arm is blown off, he doesn't cry. He just moves forward and goes and chops the enemy's heads off. So real men don't feel things. Real men engage the world with a stoicism and a gut determinism that helps them conquer reality. Well,
what harm does that do when we feed men that line? It's like the easy button for that is be stoic and hide in your bedroom, hide behind your screen, look at porn and masturbate and deal with your problems.
Yeah, it makes men addicts.
Yes, it does make us addicts, whether it's drinking, whether it's sex, whether it's work, whether it's video games, whatever it is. I've got to have something to cope with my life.
Yeah, there's a reason most addicts are males. Drug addicts are males, sex addicts are males, gambling addicts are males, by and large, over females. This is the reason, because of the male brain's susceptibility to damage in emotional regulation systems early in life, and by the cultural kind of expectations that are put on males, right? That you shouldn't feel your feelings. Now, here's the thing. I think men should feel their feelings, but they shouldn't be overwhelmed by their feelings.
Yes.
So if all you do is feel your feelings and become a basket case all the time because you're in fear or you're overburdened with grief or sadness, you're not going to be very effective either. So there's a balance here. Men need to know how to process their feelings in a healthy way. So typically men do one of two things. They either stuff their feelings down or they blow them up all over the place.
Yep.
Neither are helpful. Neither are helpful for the man to develop a sense of secure self. They're not helpful in his relationships, and they sure as hell don't work as emotional regulation tools. They just keep you recycling the past.
Right.
So the key is to learn to begin to feel your feelings, to engage with other men who can help you modulate your emotions. And then once you can engage your feelings with the degree of agency or control, then you can start to use those emotions to move you forward and accomplish things, because all emotions do is they are the energy engine of our activity,
Yep.
right?
They
So,
show us what's going on internally, and they help us read the world around us. So when I'm feeling things, it's because of what's going on inside of me, and it's motivating me to be either more connected or more protective of myself. So is it a positive emotion? Am I being drawn toward? Is it a negative emotion? Do I need to watch out and protect or even escape to make sure that I'm safe? Because safety is the name of the game. And doesn't it feel so good to go and look at porn and touch yourself to regulate those emotions? It is the easy button of life, and we've kind of been sold that as a culture. And that's what's so tragic about this whole deal, is that we're dealing with issues that, frankly, were generations past have not had to deal with this.
oh, okay, but let me ask a question. Is there any man on here who will say, after a session of jacking off to porn, that was the best sex I've ever had? I want to do that again right away because I feel so fulfilled and so overjoyed and proud of myself. Does
Isn't it
anybody actually say that?
isn't it closer to, I'm glad that's over with, you know?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
shit, I did that again. I swore I
Yeah.
wasn't going to do that again.
Yes. Well, that's
Right.
why you don't broadcast that to the world. Nobody posts on Facebook, just jacked off again. I mean, that's that's not, nobody's like putting that out there as, look at me, be proud of me. I mean, that's awesome.
Oh,
Again,
in a men's church group, it goes like this. Would y'all pray for me? I'm having a problem with lust.
yeah, exactly. And again, we're not trying to shame anything. What we're merely saying is there are consequences for our actions, and we want to be, as men, on a path of growth and connection, which means I want to be building towards something and growing towards something instead of stuck in the same old stuff that, frankly, many of us have been stuck in for our entire lives.
Yeah. And Brad says, I gotta bring Brad into this because he says pursuing a real relationship has a high risk of great pain. It does, Brad, but it
Yes.
also has a high potential to reward you. So my question is, when in your story do you begin to believe that you should only focus on the risk and not the reward part of the equation? And the answer is early in my life, I learned that,
Yep.
right? Because I had a lot of experiences where I didn't get connection with those people that I was supposed to feel closest to. So now I think the whole world is like that.
Mm.
And that's why we need help in healing that. And Brad, I know you're getting that kind of connection, and you're enjoying kind of being with us on retreats and other guys in groups, and you're learning that not only is there a risk in relationships, but there's potential for a lot of reward, a potential for a lot of belonging, a lot of joy, a lot of delight. And it's worth, if all you get growing up is the risk, I can see why you don't want to take the risk anymore. But would you be willing to try it again in a place where others are committed to your growth and your care and to wanting to connect with you? And that's what we're trying to offer guys, is that place where they can get that.
Well, that's going to be the real gold when we go to Colorado, Scott, because I've done adventure trips like this before. And what happens is, yes, you're going on a grand adventure. Yes, you're seeing some amazing sights. Yes, you're going to some wonderful places, but it's the people that you spend the time with while you go that builds those new neural pathways in your brain that says, I can have an experience like this. I can be with guys who can see me, care for me, walk with me in the darkest place of my life as I talk about the things I'm really ashamed of, and yet they still love me and give me their kindness. And we have an adventure together. We go and we see those super normal things, because who has ever hiked up to a 14,000 foot peak? It's probably a small fraction of the world's population. And so we get to see all the beautiful sights and have all the beautiful connections in doing this. And that's what makes it a grand adventure. It's not just because of where you go, it's because of who you go with. And that's what I'm looking forward to.
And I would just sum this up by saying what you just said can be summed up by saying, If you grew up feeling like relationships were not worth the risk of the pain they cause you, might I suggest that the way to heal that would to be engaged in reparative relationships where that whole story can be reversed for you.
Yes.
So instead of the relationship bringing me pain, I realize even though the relationship building part is difficult and it's not an easy button, when I go through it, I experience great joy as well as a sense of pride in myself, as well as a deep bond with other people. And it's well worth it.
That's a great point, Scott. David C., I've done it. I'm looking forward to doing it again with you guys. Yes, buddy. Here we go.
Yeah, man.
About 10 days in counting. We're getting ready to be there together. So Warren has a question. Is porn any different or worse than NSA or zipless sex? It's no more unfulfilling like pegging out on a massive ice cream cone sundae. I mean,
What is NSA?
I don't know. It's a great question. That's these
Warren, you got to
Warren's
educate us on some language here. What is NSA or zipless sex?
Yep. That's a great question. All I can say is I can tell you that in my life, porn has not been satisfying. And at the end of the day, no strings attached. I mean,
I don't like porn anymore. I mean,
yeah,
I never really liked it all that much. It always seemed very like people are just going through these mechanical motions and stuff. And I know guys say, no, I look at it for the passion that they're showing to one another and no strings attached is what
yeah,
NSA
yeah,
means.
yeah.
I mean, is porn any different than no strings attached sex? Well, yeah, you're not doing it with another person. So when you're actually having sex with another person, you are bonding with them. When you're watching sex while you have sex with yourself, you're not bonding with anybody other than the images you're looking at, which can be very objectifying, but you're not really having a human experience.
Right.
But when you have an NSA sex, you're not really having very much of a human experience with the people you're having sex with either. Because if you're hooking up, some guys are hooking up every night. Some guys hook up 5 times a week, whatever.
Yep.
How relational is the sex that you're having if you're screwing a new person every week or 2 a week or whatever?
And stick around for next week because we're going to have a conversation about that on one of our episodes next week. So that's a great question to end on. How rewarding is no strings attached sex?
And Daniel says, I want the bond with the benefits.
Yeah, fair enough.
So
I get it. Well, guys, if you want to have connections that last beyond just the momentary experience, I'd encourage you to reach out to us. You can check us out at wegotballspod.com to schedule a conversation with Scott or I, and to check out our upcoming retreats. We're going to have those out for you this weekend, so you can check that out on the weekend and see how you can connect to one of our retreats either in Gulf Shores or in Nashville coming up in the fall. And we want to continue to build relationships with you. Email us. wegotballs00@gmail.com. wegotballs00@gmail.com. We want to be hearing your stories, connecting with your questions, and be personally interacting with you, even though we're not here on live. And we'll be back here next week. Scott, we're going to have a special 4th of July live next week, aren't we?
We are.
In the middle of a work. So all you guys that say, I can't check in for the live, let's see if we can get to 300 guys on the live next 4th of July.
There will be a rocket in every pocket on the 4th of July.
And we're going to be back here talking about some great topics and answering your questions and engaging all these themes about masculinity and sexuality right here on We Got Balls.
And you do too. Have a good weekend, guys.
Take